You're listening to In Session, where marriage and family therapist Mark Ponce sits down with your therapist and other therapists in the community to talk about who they are, why they do the work, and what keeps them coming back. This is Beyond the Intake, where we slow down and talk about the parts of therapy, identity, and being human that don't fit into a first session. Thank you for being here. Please enjoy today's episode.
What drew you to become a therapist?
Yeah, guess it's kind of there's a long answer and this is a podcast, so I guess we can go on the longer side.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I think I really really young, I think I really was curious about people, and I think it came from a place that probably comes to most therapists, psychologists, and so forth, out of a desire to belong. I think I really just wanted to understand the society I was a part of, and I wanted to understand people so that I can learn, so I can feel a stronger sense of belonging, so I can learn how to fit in, how to belong, how to.
When you say you were a kid, what?
Like middle school. Yeah.
So pretty early on.
Elementary school. So I would, this was in Egypt, in Cairo, Egypt. So I would sit and observe people play, like my, schoolmates and stuff. And, I would ask people questions. I just try to learn. There's a period in my life too, where I did a lot of listening. And then as I got older, I found out that there philosophy and psychology is a field. I didn't know that I was interested in the questions, didn't know there was a field of study out there. And partly that was what wasn't available in the school system that I was a part of, that was a lot more STEM focused. So didn't even know about philosophy and psychology until much later, into my early teens. And then when I did, I remember my cousin was like, "Oh, you've heard of Freud? There's a whole field
Have you heard of Freud?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay, so they're doing this already. And so I picked up some reading, and I looked up stuff online. This was early online kind of, you can look up things and very simple ways, and started to learn, and then got excited. I struggled in high school because I really knew what I wanted to learn, and I wasn't getting taught that. So I have the biology textbook or whatever, but then underneath it had a philosophy book or something in class, and I'd read it. And then in college, I really fell in love with philosophy and psychology, because it was trying to ask the same question from different sides of just who are we, why are we here, what are we trying to do, how can we make it, how can we survive together? How can we, explore? How can we live together? And various questions that come out of that. And then I got into research and more neuropsychology, because I thought at that time, as many people did, I think when they're kind of early, they get taught into that pathway of if you learn more of the brain and what it can do, and then we can advance technology enough, it'll cure everything. So that was sort of a very reductionistic sort of focus.
What do you think about that, Frey?
I'm glad you asked. I think it's a little, I think it's not, I think we all kind of experiencing a wave of that with technology of there are a lot of people out there that promise all sorts of things. This is true of technology and also the health industry and other industries, where there's a lot of marketing and a lot of things that get promised. And then, it builds up a lot of excitement and a lot of investment, I think. And then, what it actually results in, I think, matters less, because by that point, I think it's sort of sold itself on some level. And so I think I'm a little suspicious, I think, and skeptical, because it's I think there's a lot of fuss and talk to build up these things that haven't yet occurred or happened about what technology will fix, and it hasn't. And, not even to touch on if it can even fix the things that we're trying to make it fix, like, our sense of well-being and our health and these things that, I think it is like the wrong tool, essentially. I think it's just a tool that's like running around trying to fix like a bunch of things and like, causing like a bunch of other things to like, leak out. And then you're just kind of running around and plugging holes. And, yeah, so I don't know that it's really getting to the, as they say in like our program and things like that, like, further up the stream, to the source of the, the pollution. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this imagery you're providing of like, I'm thinking like, honestly, a screwdriver kind of fit in these many different places, adapting to do the job. And like, maybe it's doing it, or maybe it's creating like a bigger hole or a bigger problem.
Yeah.
That maybe we're not addressing fully as a society. We just think that that's the quick option to fix those things.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the challenge is, most of the time our academic like environment leans into knowledge over experience. That's what it's built for. It's built for like disseminating knowledge and not experience as well, like Western academia, like college. And so it's sort of like, yeah, it biases us to that direction. And I think it produces a lot of people that come out and practice things that are tailored towards like disseminating knowledge as opposed to experience. And so what happens is, it just becomes about like sharing information. And like we did like that somatic thing earlier, and like we could have like just sat down and talked about it. And I think it wouldn't have gotten any of the, felt experience of it. So,
for people listening to the podcast and aren't accessing the video of us doing this,
yeah.
Maybe you can explain, what made you want to start with that? Like, what is so important about moving our bodies before something like this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is actually a really important thing for me about like therapy is, and maybe this answers even questions that like, things we'll talk about, but like, I think a big thing that I've learned is, I've gotten really good at tuning into my body as a therapist, and while I'm in therapy and like outside of therapy over time, and like I pick up a lot about my constriction, like tightening, and my expansion, like my loosening, in different parts of my body. And I think if I arrive at something with a sense of like, I mean, everything, new, like this is new for me, and everything that like I go into, I can go into with some level of like, I'm carrying some sense of expectation or desire for something to go a certain way, or pressure or whatever, pressure from the day, from the night before. And then it just kind of builds in my body. And so just like any kind of movement or, attunement to that, and like touching on that a little bit to let myself kind of flex it. It's like stretching. I mean, it is stretching, but then it's like I'm also kind of trying to stretch particular parts of me that I'm aware carry certain things. So, if there's a particular part of my back or a particular part of my neck that carries something, when I do feel rushed, or when I do feel like particular experiences, I know to kind of take extra care with that, before things and after things and during things.
And for listeners out there who are like, what does, like, stretching sounds cool and all. Like,
yeah.
Before you start something, maybe you want to become loose. But when you use the word parts of your body that carry certain things, well, what does that mean?
Yeah. I think like, it could be, again, like an expectation of something that's happening for me or from the group I'm, sitting with, or the other person that's across from me, that like I can kind of feel, and it's not like a negative thing at all. I mean, sometimes too, it's an excitement. There's a lot of excitement, or there's a lot of like, um, there's a sense of anticipation, or there are like feelings that are like, kind of bubbling up, and they come as bodily sensations, and so, I'll notice with some clients, like my body might like be leaning and tilting from like this shoulder, like this way, as I'm like kind of leaning in. And I'll kind of tend to, like, if I'm not careful, that really will kind of make my body like feel a little distorted. And so I mean, that's kind of when I'm a little bit like aware of what's happening in my body and trying to like loosen it up a little bit, because there's a physical, I mean, to the question, I think there's like a physical sense of these questions and conversations. The emotional load you can feel physically, and can attune yourself to feel physically. And so I want my body prepared for the weight of it, in that way. I don't know if that answers, but it's like,
it makes me think about like clients who say before something big, they feel those butterflies in the stomach.
Yeah.
Or like me, my tell if I'm nervous or anything is I start like coughing, and I have this very visceral feeling in my chest where I'm like, the nervousness lives in this area, and I have to do things like a deep breath to like supplement that area to calm down a little bit. Or like, I've sat across clients who are heavy tappers of the foot. Like will move around like their things and their legs and everything like that. And every time I've gotten curious, I'm like, hey, I noticed as we're talking about this, your leg moves more. Tell me about that movement. And then when they focus there, it's interesting what comes up, when we slow down to our bodies. And I think that's what I hear you saying, of like the importance of understanding our everyday bodily reactions to certain things, or preparation of certain things, because there can be a lot of information there for us.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean when you say?
Absolutely. Like, it's like a band, and I want to be able to have it like stretched enough, flexible, malleable enough, prepared for the kind of thing that I think we're like saying, like, just, we're going to be somewhere that will encounter tightness, or even encounter like, maybe agitation or activation. And so there's a lot of like kind of movement, kinetic energy or something, right? It's like a lot of buildup. And so being able to just warm it up and like get it flexible and, prepare it for that feels good. You were saying like the telltale things, like I, when I do certain things, it tends to be like medical, sometimes like getting my blood drawn, it tends to be stuff like that. I'll giggle. I'll start to sort of like, that's like, I'm aware that I'm getting nervous, but apparently it doesn't happen enough that like, I have to tell, the nurse or something, like, hey, like, this is a response that I do. I'm not sort of like, I'm mocking you, I'm sorry. But
just laughing at the nurse.
Just laughing. Yeah. There's just like things that are unique to each of us. Yeah.
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 It is an interesting thought, right? And maybe we'll get into this further when we get into like talking more about your clinical work. But I do wonder, for you, in preparation for sessions with people, especially if it's, I don't want to be leading in any way with the question, but like in preparation for sessions, do you ever have something you do for your body before your client steps in?
Yeah, I mean, part of that is, again, like knowing my body and areas of tightness and looseness, and because I do have like shoulder and back pain in particular parts, I'll lay down on the floor, lay down flat on the floor. In fact, I just got a heating pad for my office so that it can also like heat up my like spine area and like my back. So it's kind of like warming that area so that I can also like, because then I can maintain a certain form of posture that can help me, move in and out of the things that I want to move in and out of. It's not it's not like something in particular as much as it's giving my body the capacity to lean in and out of the things I want it to organically in the moment. So I will lay on the floor. Sometimes when it's sort of, so again, there could be the other side of it, of like when there's a lot of anticipation that is built up from my anticipation for a session that, I've like been anticipating and like excited about, or worried or nervous or concerned for this client in some way, or the felt anticipation from the client as maybe they told me like, hey, like I really need to come in for this extra session or something.
Yeah.
And then I will feel the kind of the buzz and the energy in my body, and I will do push-ups, or I will do like, I'll do some kind of like workout. Yeah, I'll do like a physical workout. I like push-ups just because it's like, it is a almost full body kind of thing that like uses your own body's weight and gravity, I like that kind of thing of like holding up my own kind of, weight. And then it also just really uses a lot of the breath, and it exhausts, and it really kind of, and
Right.
yeah, it's almost like a also forced reset for my breathing too. So it helps me then go, get the breathing a little deeper, from just up here to like further down. Yeah, because a lot of people talk about like, get your breathing, and they'll try to kind of go at it directly. And I think if you do an exercise, your breathing will get deeper just by forced naturally. Like it's just going to do that. Yeah. So like push-ups, or some people like to do squats, or like jumping jacks, or, anything. But I think those are like more accessible and popular. I think like jumping jacks, or some kind of like, yeah. Yeah. That's the kind of preparation, mostly body.
Yeah. I love it. I'm just thinking about the push-ups, of how like it's so close to the ground and like the floor. It's like literally on the ground. I think about a buddy of mine who like would come do therapy in I forget what the shoes are called, but they're pretty much like no shoes, but like they're like really close to the floor, so that he could feel like very grounded.
Yeah.
And would walk around barefoot,
Yeah.
in the earth or whatever it is, to get like some of that energy out. And I'm just thinking about like this push-up example, or even the exercise example, of like really grounding the primacy of like our being, and like letting the energy out into the natural. I feel woo-woo for some people out there listening, but it just feels like such a natural way of energy release.
Yeah. Like to like feet to the ground is really powerful. Personally, I like find, and this is kind of funny because it's the opposite almost of grounding, water to be like, like submerging, and it's actually the opposite, because I'll put my hands or something, it's kind of like they're floating, right? It's like but I like to use water to try and help me, regulate externally, if I'm like struggling to regulate internally. So submerging like my face or my hands. Also regulate temperature. Like if you ever find yourself like, really hot or really cold, there's nothing that's, I think, quicker than just submerging it in really hot water when you're cold, or really cold water when you're hot, like to really help. And I mean, some people's bodies, maybe it makes it worse if your body's really good at adapting and, and balancing. But for me, it really, it's like, it sponges, it just takes the energy of the water. It's heat, it's current, it's sort of relaxing and soothing quality. So yeah, just good water, and on the face, on my hands.
That's my go-to between sessions. You see me running to the bathroom a lot of times.
Yeah.
Half of it's because I have to pee, and the other half is I run my wrists under cold water, because that shock to my nervous system is so regrounding, and I need it in between sessions, so then I can show up, for my next client in that way. And like my therapist, along with just a lot of thought people in our field, talk about the visceral reactions we have to what you're describing as like hot and cold, how that's necessary for certain regrounding practices, especially when we're super anxious. And my therapist always like, when this happens, find some ice cubes and just like throw it in your palms and squeeze hard, right? Because you will be back in the moment when you do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah. Intense. And it really, I enjoy things that can be, really immediate and accessible in that way, and that's a really accessible thing. Um, yeah. And I veered from the questions of like how we got into, or I got into therapy.
That's okay. Yeah, maybe we could just go back there.
Yeah. I want to make sure. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, you mentioned, growing up in Egypt.
Yeah.
Maybe you can. I know we've talked about it before, but help me understand more about what that was like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing is at that time too, there wasn't a lot of models for psychology and philosophy for that part. Like, it was a little bit harder for me to see examples of that, really STEM focused in that period of time, and in the school I was in particular. So yeah, I really struggled because I really wanted I had like an idea of what I wanted to pursue, and it was really challenging to get there. But yeah, I mean, I grew up, in a very, very busy, buzzing city, with just a lot of like density and movement and a lot of history, a lot of past and complexity to that. Um, and yeah, me and my family, we moved, we left, but thereafter the country and the city like went through some pretty challenging times of like civil unrest, revolution, things like that. I left, and the Arab Spring happened after, which was like a series of like revolutions in the area. Um, and like a lot of these things leave a lot of imprint for people. In their lives, because it really, kind of, you think about like for people who maybe haven't had experiences of cataclysmic societal disruptions like that, like in certain parts of America or something, when you're kind of more shielded from that, I think the one thing in recent memory that you can maybe connect to is the pandemic.
Totally.
And like that experience was so collective, and like you can get any two people to sit down in coffee shop or something and start talking, and if they start talking about their experiences during the pandemic, you'll see a lot of commonality, and also a lot of like shared, sometimes a lot of unprocessed, like grief or stress or accumulated like stuff that they kind of put aside and didn't come back to, because I think it was a really like stressful time for a lot of people, and also very, transformative time for a lot of people. But you get those experiences in many other countries that have more to do with like, governments being toppled, or like wars entering into the home and the space of safety. And I see a lot of clients who come from those backgrounds, so it is really like a powerful thing.
Yeah, you mentioned a second ago, like, that has impact on a lot of people. And I'm wondering, even though you had left before all this had happened, what impact has it left on you?
I mean, when I visited, I got to see some of these things, and it's definitely like it's a very like shocking maybe is one way to put it, to see like, areas that you grew up around, and areas that you've identified as like home, and like, identified in some level of predictability and stability, feel like it's sort of on fire, feel like it's sort of at risk, like the kind of the city's shaking, it's like rumbling, and the sort of the ground is beneath it is sort of like not as stable. Having that kind of experience really, I think, it's kind of, it jolts one to really reflect on like, your sense of like, what you have in your life, what, its longevity, and it really kind of cues a lot of people to think. I think sometimes it gets people very reflective, when they have the resources and the capacity. I think, unfortunately, a lot of times unresourced, without the capacity and with the continuous exposure, right, it traumatizes people. It keeps them in it, or like it locks them I want to choose my words carefully. It's not. It really it gets them stuck, I think, in a place of like survival, right? Or like stuck in a state of like, um, maybe terror or a feeling of like, imminent danger or loss. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very powerful experience. Like people, you know, in this country have experienced natural disasters, especially in the South, and the Southeast, like, frequently, and know maybe what it's like to, yeah, like feel, your home be potentially like at risk and the environment that you grew up around to be at risk of like changing in some like fundamental way. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, that's kind of like, an experience, a unique experience. Yeah.
Mm. Coming back to you growing up and there not being a lot of models or
Yeah.
figures or even systems set up for philosophy and psychology.
Yeah.
What kept you coming back to it? Without that level of reinforcement.
Yeah. Um, I think I was just really yearning for like some answers. And I really wanted to get to, explore the questions that like you know, I was really curious about personally. And I think, that's probably the biggest thing I've personally learned about pedagogy is like really the flame of curiosity. And when I was young, it was still sort of common to sort of like try to funnel people into particular forms of curiosity and forms of like here's what you should do and learn. I mean, it still is in a way now. Still, like there's still like a lot of force in education and a lot of direction and a lot of like kind of like confinement and but I really struggled with that personally. I think a lot of other people, like peers and stuff of mine, like, I think they people try to manage with what they can. But I struggled with it, and I kind of was a lot more rebellious in trying to learn the things I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until college that I really got to just go and take the courses I want to take and learn about. I studied, comparative religion. I studied philosophy. I studied psychology. I studied, a lot of the things that I wanted to explore, anthropology, things like that. So just was exciting for me to try to help, answer some of the core questions I had about like, making sense of the environments I was in as a kid. And I think a lot of questions for people stem from, again, when I said earlier, like belonging, it stems also from like wanting to understand why they've been hurt or how they've been hurt or like, it sort of comes from maybe like rooted questions around like what happened to me, why, questions about like um but authenticity, belonging, things like that. And then it gets intellectualized. And I think that's sort of maybe what happened in undergrad for me is it gets intellectualized into like, if I can understand the brain, if I can understand these like sociological concepts, I can understand more of like, I can answer these questions of like what happened to me, but the reason, and this is, I think, this is the long answer to get back to therapy is, then I stumbled on, I can answer some of these questions in relationship with other people. I can sit with other people and I can experience it too. I can get experiential knowledge through sitting with people, in a way that, will be really hard and maybe impossible to get sitting and reading textbooks. So that's where I stumbled on phenomenology first, which is the program that I know I mentioned like a few of like my peers have come on here and like mentioned existential phenomenological psychology.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah, like I'm sure more people will come to give you like, and each one will probably be a little different. Yeah, like existential philosophies, straightforward, just philosophy about like asking questions about our existence, like, death, life, and purpose, meaning. pondering these things, pondering questions that stem from, being in that place of like anxiety or despair about these questions of mortality. I mean, I think that like the big thing is every once in a while, and this will happen in really touching and deep experiences with clients and sessions, you'll get this moment in the space with someone of touching on like death, and what that means, that it exists, and that we all kind of live in a world where that exists and is inevitable, and that we, as a client recently said, like that we kind of just, we find ways to live with that reality. We find ways to sort of like move with that reality, with that element of our reality. And I mean, everything comes from that, probably, life, like art, expression, all of it comes from that place of like, okay, so what are we going to do with that knowledge that we have this thing? And so I think existential philosophy is a real direct, let's address this head on. Let's like, confront the questions head on. Let's, really talk about it. Let's try to, create language for it. And I think phenomenology is the focus on experiential knowledge. That's the part that I stumbled on in an interesting way at first to that, which is I was studying like religions and cultures in college and undergrad. I was really interested in studying, different cultures and religions, and I enjoyed this was under anthropology more than psychology back then, but a phenomenological approach, which was, they would also call it like an emic approach, like an approach to studying, other cultures and religions by like experiencing it, by going in and like engaging in the activities and the rituals and, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I started to do on some level, and enjoyed. And so when I got the opportunity to know that there was a program that was seeking to do that with psychology and with the human experience and with providing like mental health care, by like sitting with people and trying to understand their actual first person experience. So like for me, what that means, like in a very in a more direct way than the mystery of it, is that like I will sit with a client and there is something that we're struggling to understand about their experience. And there is like maybe books right there that spell out some more diagnostic language or generalizable terms, or a lot of, libraries and databases for that now. I mean, TikTok is one of them. You can go on TikTok and you can find like language to express, right, like shared experiences and felt things and stuff. And, not to scoff at it. Like, I think that a lot of people on there have like, found particular language there that like, really touches something that hasn't been spoken to before.
Right. Like provides that access to knowledge, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think what's really powerful is really stepping into the struggle with a client in the room, into like, let's try to put aside like some of the packaged language that exists out there and that has been served to us, and is maybe easier, and more maybe comforting to jump to, and instead sit with the like, tell me more about like what that feels like in your body. Tell me more of like how it moves. Tell me more of, you can use very like you can use sort of more vague language, mysterious language. We can laugh and giggle at like, what the hell are we even saying right now? And really like stumble and take our time with it until we arrive at like very unique and particular language. I think the relationship with a therapist and the forming of language is some of the most, I think, coolest things that happen in my experience with therapy. And it's akin only to like my experience with like, my partner, where like I hope many people know, and I'm kind of not just like me, but like if you're in a romantic relationship and you've been with someone for years, you will form your own language. You'll form your own, like, almost dialect of like, a vernacular of like words for things, nicknames for things, like, short, gestures for things and stuff like that. And like forming a language to me with a client is one of the signs that like, oh, we're really getting into something fascinating here. So yeah, that's a really important part for me in the process.
Ooh. I'm taking it all in right now.
Yeah.
The code and everything you're saying feels powerful.
I hope that's not just, do you form languages with your partner or? Yeah.
Sam and I, we yeah,
Every now and then laugh.
yeah. You're so right. And as I think about it, our connection runs so deep because I think that's a factor in it. We know each other so well, and we're connected in that way.
Yeah.
It holds a smile on my face and a deep place in my heart. And if you can have that with a client, I'm just imagining the change that many people start to experience in themselves. Like, what do you say to, you brought up TikTok and these books and all these other structures in place that provide an immense amount of knowledge that is never ending.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of the person out there who's like, okay, so why do I need to go to therapy then? Is this what we're talking about here of this language built together the only reason? Or like, what makes therapy so different?
Yeah. I think therapy is like it's a very wild thing. And again, I kind of like trying to connect it to like what I was telling you about with my youth, which is if someone had, I didn't know much about therapy back then. I didn't know like really what it was, right? So if someone had told me, the things you're curious about, and then the deeper parts of them, not the intellectualized stuff of like, I don't know, Socrates and Plato, or whatever, but like the deeper parts of like why you're really asking these questions. If you can have a relationship where you can try to explore those, with a sense of like, just progressive, gradual approach towards the interior, of yourself, and thus I think as a mirror reflection, right, the interior of others. And if you can have a relationship where you can really explore what I think therapy is, which is like you can really explore relationship itself, I think that's amazing. I don't think we have anything that's like that. I don't think there's anything else like that in the world. Like, I don't think there's anything that gives us a frame to really, otherwise we're just in relationship, which is great. But I think like having therapy is a place that I can go into a relationship with this frame and intention of like, oh, we're actually here to talk about what it's like to be in a relationship and to reflect on it and to sort of map it out. It's kind of like, I know this metaphor comes up a lot, but like video games with like you're mapping out the like gray areas, the unexplored territory and stuff when you're moving around, and it's like you're going into those areas. So a big thing like for me is, I think the most important question for me in the therapy I do is I always come back to like, where haven't you gone, in that place, in relationship, more than just like in, just your own, it's not so solipsistic. I don't want people to be so stuck in their own inner world, but it's like, where haven't you gone in a relationship? What haven't you felt comfortable to sort of share and be in with other people? What haven't you trusted other people with? What haven't you been able to do, right, in some ways? And we might not get to do all those things because therapy has a frame that sometimes can be limiting. There are things that I'm like, oh, I wish I could like, go and see this take shape in the world out for you, with my clients. But, I'm also respectful of the frame and the institution by which we kind of, we've arrived at the place we're in, right, with this relationship. So
you're talking about like just keeping it in the office.
Keeping, yeah. I mean, there's, the therapists that go outside and stuff at times, but there are like there are some limits around what we can explore, but at least we can come closer and closer, nearer, probably much more than people get to without the intentional, right, like reflection and approach. So it really comes back to like, if I'm ever lost in a session, or if I'm ever just kind of like, what is happening here? I just ask that question of myself, So if anyone's my clients, like, that's what's happening. I'm just like, how can we deepen this felt like connection, relationship? What hasn't happened here, and why? I think the why is really significant, because I then realize like, oh, you don't want to do this because in the past that's meant that, or
Yes.
and okay, so what are we going to do about that? Because you could choose to be like, well,
We're not touching
that.
Yeah.
But then I think what's transformative there is naming it, like, and that's been really powerful. And it's not a forced connection. I'm not trying to make people do things they don't want to do or they're not ready to do, but I am trying to, I'm trying to get people to be more, I guess, aware of what's happening and what they're choosing and what, so it's like, I mean, and so that's actually some of the most beautiful moments in therapy, is like, we're both kind of sitting there and it's even nonverbal, and I'm looking at my client and I'm like, oh, we can't. And they're like, no, and we don't have to, I mean, even just in the facial expressions, and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, it's like, there are areas that we touch on and we both kind of go like, okay, we've touched on it. We've felt its bounds, and maybe that's okay for now.
I feel like that really builds a trusting relationship, that a client can look at you and say no, and it doesn't come with a repercussion or a consequence. Maybe that really upsets you, and then maybe you built a relationship enough to like have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
But even in the nonverbals, for you both to just sit there and be like, we're not ready for this yet, and that's okay.
Yeah.
The passion is felt in that moment, that you're probably right that person probably doesn't feel as deeply in other areas of their life.
Yeah.
Right. It makes me think of this question of, like, the popular thought about therapy is that you have a problem and you go into the space and you solve that problem and you're done.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of people out there think, like, we have this presenting challenge and we go to this person who's an expert and they'll walk me through and figure that out and problem solve for me.
Yeah.
How do you balance that want with everything you're talking about here of what therapy really is underneath?
I mean, I want to address that want and just how bizarre that feels to me.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm gonna try to like, I'm almost like noticing like I'm kind of annoyed, because
I feel like that's inaccurate in the way I'm describing it.
No, I feel like it's perfectly accurate, but I'm annoyed at the fact that want exists and is a sort of a thing that's present and that people arrive with. And I don't blame them for arriving with that sense of like, I have some problems, we're gonna solve those, and then we're done, right? Like, but it's bizarre to me because nothing really works like that. I mean, not even the most technical, like, structured, almost like monotonous robotic jobs that exist out there. I mean, you think about like, yeah, like, which again, like, feel like kind of on the other side, right? Like the more kind of knowledge based, the more technical kind of in the, maybe like the structured kind of binary sense, right? Like ones and zeros, like, if you have like computer issues, right? You do bring somebody to help work with it and stuff and fix the problem. But then like anybody that works in a company where, right, they have like an IT person or something knows, like, they don't just like bring the IT person and then go like, all right, I'm done with like IT problems now. Like, you have to have somebody that's capable of coming in because you know that the computer will have other errors at some point or other issues. I don't want to like really localize or make like a technical landscape of the human psyche, but like even technology doesn't work like that, and technology is a lot more binary and like, right, localized. But even technology doesn't work like that. It continues to have new problems, and new problems need an existing relationship to develop a way to address it and a language for it and all of that, right? So that happens with technology that is a lot more direct, right? Like this line, like this break in this wire caused this thing, right? then what about the human psyche? That's a lot more mysterious and a lot more ever evolving and ever, shifting, right? It's a lot more of like the atomic thing of like you observe it and it moves, right? So it's like, you do need even more so a relationship, an ongoing relationship with someone that can address, and it's not that person, it's the space. The space can address these things as they shift and move around. And I think that's the case with like, yeah, having a medical provider, having like somebody hopefully that attends to your body, your somatic health, and like, whether a physical trainer or a yoga instructor or like a massage therapist or whatever, right? Like you're having these people because they are forming and helping you form a relationship with that part of yourself that's going to be lifelong as you exist as a human being. And then, I don't mean to say that you have to be in mental health therapy your whole life, but you're going to be dealing with your mental health for your whole life. So, you're going to need something to attend to that. And maybe that thing will shift to other areas, it might not be your primary your, individual therapist. It could be like a group therapy, could be, different things, but having spaces for it is just an acknowledgement of what it is. It's a felt knowledge of what's happening, which is you are a person with, right, like mental well-being that needs to be attended to like anything else. Yeah.
What an interesting perspective. Really, I don't think I've heard it as clearly said as that of like, what's the purpose of therapy? Like why people come in the door other than to problem solve. And I think you're absolutely right. And like, I so agree that, nothing else functions as like one problem, one and done.
Yeah.
There comes to be more and more, and the space allows us to just engage with those things in a way we're not able to do everywhere else.
Yeah.
And if there's a client who's like, this is really big, and they come in and then that gets solved, and maybe that feels satisfying enough, that's like building that trust enough to say you can come back when other things come up. When another thing happens. I think that is also a beautiful part.
I mean, another part to that is, what that is the deepening, the deepening of the layers into the work with your therapist or with yourself, which is if you're coming in to resolve something, right? I don't want to like, it could be it could be different categories, or it could be, but it's at a particular layer, right? Like a loose kind of boundary, like it's the particular layer, and then you solve it, and then you stop tending to your mental health, and it comes, another thing will come up, right? It will probably be at that layer on some level, I don't imagine it would magically sort of like, right, sink into something. But what therapy allows for is if you continue and then another problem comes, it's not as though we're digging or it's like that linear, but generally speaking, it tends to feel like you're getting into sort of addressing issues and things that are coming up that are at deeper and deeper levels of your inner self, your relationships with other people, the questions that you're posing, or the things you're afraid of and the things you desire. We get to the deeper parts of them. It allows you to do, right, much more deeper work. I mean, and again, like to your point, everything functions like that. Even like plastic toys, right? Like they need kind of repair every once in a while. And the more in-depth repair, like your car or whatever you can do, the longer it'll function. And if you keep doing superficial layers of repair, you'll just have to do that more frequently. And but that's like physical objects that are a lot less complex than the human psyche. So it's like, why would you not think that the human psyche is like even way more complex, and it's way more important to have an ongoing relationship for? Yeah.
I love that perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that even deepens my perspective on the work too, and gives me language to talk about it. And I think gives a lot of people who are listening language to know like why it's important. I'm thinking about even my family members who are like, come on, this therapy thing that you do, like what's the point of it? But when you put it that way, it makes so much sense that it just allows you to go to these places that you would go to in any other area of your, like any other material thing in your life, just for yourself. Yeah, it's so powerful. So you're talking about getting, into these layers and getting deeper and deeper with clients. And as I know as another therapist, like it's a lot for us to take on emotionally.
Yeah.
How can you go day in and day out taking on this emotional load and then still thrive in your own life? How do you do that?
I had to, no, yeah, it's good. Like, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, sometimes I just have to accept that, like, sometimes I won't be able to thrive, like in the sense of like, sometimes things won't be good. Sometimes things won't be okay because I've leaned into my work, but that happens for people that work on, the social media algorithm, right? For like, not to scoff at other people's work and stuff, but like, that happens for anybody in any job. And even people that, some of them are my clients that really think that their job is, not aligned with their values and their purpose and meaning. Mine is. And I'm grateful to have that. It's a privilege. And I've had to sacrifice some things to be able to do that. But it also means that when I do struggle and suffer, when I do feel like, I'm in a down week, or like it's rough because I've leaned in a lot with my work with clients, it's a toll that I kind of pay in a way. And I'm just kind of like, okay, it doesn't mean that I don't like do things, with myself and for myself. Obviously I take care of myself. I find like, if my question I'm posing is like, how can I like deepen my relationship with you as my client, or, in even, consult group, peers, and like, right, like friends, all that question goes with everything. So, but if I'm asking that question is also being asked of me, and it's also being asked of like, what have I been able to do in order to come into the room that day and feel resourced and feel able to ask that question, have the capacity to like lean into answers for it in the moment that are unique and organic to that moment and what shows up. And so so like I do have to do a lot of things, right? Like I have to have spaces, ritualistic spaces to sort of like go to and like unload things. I have to tend to my body. I have to do a lot of, there's a lot of like rituals and sort of like things that I do in order to be able to come into the room and feel somewhat prepared as much as I can, as many times as I can. And, kind of fail at it sometimes, and I'll bite it, just kind of be like, oh, this is a tough week. I started not feeling as resourced, and now I know why. I can feel why, I'm experiencing it. And it's humanizing too. People see me, my clients see me, a little bit in a certain way there, and that's humanizing. And I think it's really important too for, that. But
What do you mean by your clients see you a certain way? What is often?
I mean, they see that, they see me maybe struggling a little bit, or maybe they see me, just more tired some days, or more sort of like, and that's very vulnerable. And, it helps balance things so it doesn't feel like we're sort of, on asymmetric, I mean, there's definitely some aspects to therapy where we're, there is an asymmetry, of course. The relationship is not, exactly, like there's some aspects of it from the frame of it, right? That we're tending to the client and not to, me and you in an equal basis. But, I don't want people to focus too much on like that, I think this mythology that like a therapist has, right? Like things figured out, or like they're just so advanced, and right, because that brings people back into that space of disseminating like factual knowledge as opposed to experiential knowledge. When you are, I mean, this is, I think, what's liberating for me as an experiential sort of focused therapist is when I believe in, because I believe in the experiential process of, transformation and growth. I don't have to be like eons ahead, quote unquote, of my clients. And I don't have to always show up with a sense of like, I'm like, I got it all figured out, right? Because we can still have an experience that's still really informative and insightful and beautiful and touching and like connective, even if we're not at a place of like deep, right? Like knowledge and resource. I think I would have a lot more trouble if I was like a skills-based therapist and a very like structured therapist, and I felt very under-resourced in a moment, because then I'd be like, well, my client's gonna read and or experience that as like, how much can they give me if they're not able to give themselves, as opposed to if it's experiential, I can actually touch on something. And sometimes I do get to touch on something because I'm there with a client. We're both struggling with the fact that the season just changed, and we're both kind of feeling a dip in energy, and we're struggling through our, different, and like we can kind of talk about that together in an interesting way.
Yeah.
And not from like a sense of like, let's jump to sort of like fixing, or let's jump to like, our skills or whatever.
So
Yeah.
you're saying that like, I mean, part of the reason why, again, you're in this experiential work is because it's a lot more sustaining for you outside of the work,
Yes.
and it sounds like care for yourself, beyond just the skills that you're naming of like moving your body or whatever it might be, is allowing yourself to feel that emotional weight that you're taking on from the session or the client.
Yeah.
And like almost just committing to knowing that it's going to impact you in that way. And like, that's okay. That's what you signed up for. And also tack on the sense that it is your passion and so tied to your purpose that it makes it, at least what I'm hearing is like, it makes it easier to come back to even after down weeks, as you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think you touched on like the big thing is presence. Like if I can feel a sense of presence. So like, the question for me of like what's deepening, what isn't, and stuff in therapy is a guiding question externally with the relationship with the client. And then internally, there's a question of like, am I present? Like, why if I'm not? And all of that. That's a kind of question for me most of the time, to gauge what's happening in a moment in session. So like presence is really important, to me, is just as, maybe even more important. Actually, more important. I feel confident. More important than movements, and like the somatic thing that we did in the beginning was great. But I think it would have not been as good if we didn't feel a sense of like, if I didn't feel a sense of presence in my body and in my like connection with you. And in fact, I would have rather sat down and been completely still and stiff and just like felt a sense of like presence being here with you than doing that and feeling sort of like tuned out and somewhere else, so presence is really important.
I think presence, is a word that we therapists use a ton, and like is often in the popular vernacular, popular language of like when people are talking about mental health and care. But I'm not sure if a lot of people know what being present actually means. I'm not sure if I really know what that means, or if there's a single definition to it, which probably there's not. In your experience, what is it to be present?
Maybe hard to not like get a little woo with a little like mysterious with trying to answer that. But I mean, when we're thinking about that, I think about like when I was saying earlier, like maybe this was before we started recording, but I attend to like constriction, tightening, and expansion with the more somatic, like the body. And then with the mind, with my consciousness, I tend to the presence and the dissociation. And I have access to that for me, and I have cues for that with my client. So what that is really important for me to try to gauge if I'm going somewhere else mentally, get it like dissociating a little bit. And it's also really important for me to gauge if I feel like my client or the person across from me, is kind of dissociating a little bit. And it's hard to also like, it's gonna develop like a skill, I guess, of picking up the cues for that and stuff within yourself and within other people. But what that comes to is like, we each have like a capacity to be attending to the depth, the sort of like the like the picture, the resolution of the picture, right? We have like a capacity for the depth of resolution, and how long we can sustain that. You use technology again, like, if you have a video playing at a really high resolution, it takes a lot of your system, on the internet and all that stuff. And like, and maintaining that's challenging. And I think at times, right, for many different reasons, there's disruptions, and it kind of, it gets, the resolution sinks or it starts to lag or whatever. I think, something like that we could talk about as a metaphor, right, with what's happening in the room with people, where like people try to stay very attentive to what the other person's saying and what they're feeling in their body and what they're picking up from the other person. There's a lot that's happening, a lot of, let's say, noise and, stimulus, and then it becomes overwhelming, and maybe they start to sort of like tune away, or they wander or whatever, right? And that's natural and healthy. But over time, and this can get more complex with trauma and other stuff, but over time, I think, it becomes challenging if somebody is dissociating and withdrawing around specific things, around specific people, in specific environments and settings. It is important, because if I'm sitting in the room with somebody who's dissociating, as we're approaching something, with some charge, then I think we've lost the tether of connection to, the thing that we're trying to touch on. And some therapists will say that's even harmful. Like, if you are going into something and you're dissociating and you keep going and keep forcing it, it's more harmful, because you're reinforcing, I guess, the dissociative pattern. So it's kind of, I think about it as like a gauge, maybe you can gamify. I don't like to gamify things. And like, like kind of like a video game with like, when you would play a game and there's like it's like a mini game in a game or something, and you're like pulling a rope or you're doing some activity, and there's like a bar, and you have to kind of keep it at a certain like threshold of balance.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. And then
You're talking presence is like that.
presence is like that. It's, I mean, yeah, like when people talk about mindful presence and, meditation and stuff, like it's challenging. It's really, really challenging. You're not able to, and maybe you're not supposed to sustain it too much for too long, because it's overwhelming. But you want to tend to that like balance and try to work on it and practice it in a way so that you're able to take in the juice, the real like stuff of life. So we get to the other part, which is like, I mean, that's what life is. If I'm constantly just disconnected, different parts of disconnected, I'm not getting as much of the, the rawness and the felt experience of life, the real good stuff.
Yeah. I love this description of presence as a balance between how to be like the current, how to be present, and like what makes it difficult to be present. And it's like presence is that dynamic that exists between them. It's not like one or the other. I'm present or I'm not.
Yeah.
Presence is like, how do we come in and out of this moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're pointing to just how complex it is to say, or how complex it is to say that you're present. Right? Yeah. Because I think I hear a lot of people are just like, the solution is to be present. Right, just be present right now. Be present. And like, good reminder, but doesn't actually encapsulate how complex it is in the moment to actually be present, because there's so much just in this explanation you're giving, so much that is involved in presence and like happening both for me and you as we sit together.
There's a lot of layers. I mean, there's a lot of layers to experiencing presence, and there's a lot of like work in it, and it's very challenging. But it's really important and obviously vital for like now with technology and all that. And, and I think, technology can, and mostly hinders, but technology can also allow us to deepen our presence at times and with things that we don't have as much access to, or with, I know that like, not to be very dismissive, like I know that a lot of younger folks and like, new generations are using technology in ways to try to like, deepen their presence to some things. I remember there was like an interaction in like a comedy skit of like, like a father and daughter, and it was like about how, one was like watching a show and then like picked up their phone, and then the father was like after going like, you weren't, paying attention and upset, and the daughter said like, I looked this thing up to find out more of the context of what was, behind the scenes for this play and performance, to understand like a little bit more of like what they were showing. So it's like
A lot more wise.
yeah, I'm just like flipping through it. That's not what I'm doing. I'm playing on my phone. But yeah, like, it's just, with tools, like you can do a lot of things. Most of the time it doesn't, most of the time it takes us away from our capacity to deepen our presence. But, it's a challenging thing. It's a practice. And, yeah, I mean, I think like, I think that like touches on like a big part of therapy for me is like, how can I help us feel more comfortable with being able to slow down and savor and enjoy the like depth of simple, singular, um, like objects or sources of information, or like, it's really hard for us to like sit with something like a lot of people struggle now with reading more than they did in the past. A lot of people struggle with like sitting and doing, like, try to pick up games that were popular in the 40s or 30s, and I think most people now get pretty bored of it because a lot of them involve like a bouncing a ball or like throwing a thing, like I think
Sustained focus.
yeah, sustained focus is really challenging. Knitting, crocheting, these sorts of things, like yeah, I think like those are activities that try to bring us back to a sense of like being able to sustain ourselves with something that has a lot more depth that we've lost. But
yeah, I think that's what I heard from a lot of people as I was preparing to even start this podcast. They were like, well, how long are your episodes going to be?
yeah,
Right. And I was like, well, for the sake of it being called In Session, I want it to be at least 50 minutes. Right. I got eyes batted at me like 50 minutes for like a podcast. How are you going to expect people to listen for that long?
Yeah.
I think you're just pointing to something of like, that's very relevant in our day now, of how hard it is for people, you and I, and the people out there, to sustain focus for a good chunk of time.
Yeah.
Even for this podcast and even for therapy, it's like, to ask someone to sit and be present for 50 minutes is hard to do for both the therapist and the client, and for us just peers sitting with each other. And then, most of my episodes last a lot longer than that,
Yeah.
a couple hours, or like an hour and a half. And, I don't expect anybody to sit through the whole thing, but if you can, I mean, there's a wealth of information and knowledge that comes of it. It just takes a level of effort that maybe is hard to produce in any given moment.
Yeah.
And is it something we want to get back to? Maybe. And is it something like we want to just be more curious about what makes it hard? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Coming back to earlier, you said that clients see you even on the down weeks and like notice things about you, and like that's part of that word. How do you think? I guess the question is, does the way a client sees you in the room differ from the way like your family or friends or your partner sees you outside of the room? Is there?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a good question. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think as it should. It's just a different way of relating, and it's different, like, and I think, as many therapists know, they kind of pull and tug on each other. So, or at least like the experience of tending to people in that particular way as a therapist, right? You're kind of pulling on particular muscles, like, and abilities, and then I come home and I'm like, I just kind of want to limit the intensity of intentional presence and intentional, like, right, like I it's important for me, especially like at night, with both like replenishing the type of kind of I guess, battery or whatever, like, of the work that I do, but also with helping regulate, this is its own separate thing, helping regulate my like nervous system stuff. I try to pick like TV to watch that like is very soothing and slow and relaxed, and usually that ends up being older forms of television, like shows that are sort of like older, because they weren't as maybe I'm getting too technical with my answer, but like they weren't as it wasn't as like right, like there wasn't as much pressure from the industry, the media industry, to like have like fast pace entertainment and like intense way. People were able, right, to like sit and watch TV and kind of keep focused, right, with slow form conversations and stuff. So I love to watch like something like that late at night to help me just kind of like regulate and soothe, and also not need to attend to every single word and every single like scene and all the specificities that like.
You have to give me an example of a show you.
Sure. I'm giving this example that like, maybe I haven't mentioned it, but Little House on the Prairie is an old TV show that like, because I didn't grow up in the US, I think it was like very important to my partner and other people and the book series and all of that, that I picked up on like more recently in my life. And it's especially the earlier parts. I think later it does become more intense I think it does shift with the industry shift, but like in the earlier seasons, it is literally like watching, if you've ever watched those like YouTube videos that just have like a farm and it's just kind of slow, like it's kind of like that. It's very gentle. It takes place in this like rural area, and there are people just kind of having conversations and making coffee, and like, it's very relaxed and soothing, and it's just kind of life in a old rural part of America. And so, yeah, I mean, content aside, like obviously there's like all sorts of stuff for old TV shows and stuff, but like, but the experience of like, kind of listening to that, even the tone, the tonality, the volume, the shifts. There's not as much like shifts in sound and pitch and all these things. It's very kind of regulated and as opposed to like I love lots of TV shows now, but like if you watch like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or I don't know, any of these like big huge projects, like it's just so, I mean, it's the purpose is they really trying to keep you just so intensely like tuned in and like working your brain with all its parts, and it's a lot to follow. So I like something more passive and relaxed,
especially after a long day, a long week. I could see how that could help a lot.
Yeah,
right? And I mean, I love that you're pointing to the process of like what makes it so attractive for you, especially coming off maybe a day full of clients.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I consider like a lot of the listeners who are like, yeah, I love that I know, especially if they're looking for a therapist right now. I love that I know that this guy, spends his off time watching, Little House on the Prairie and the series. And I appreciate you giving like a formal example of that. Coming back to the question of, how it's different, the way clients see you and your family or people in your life.
Yeah, it's the relationships.
What are some examples of those differences, do you think?
I mean, the most obvious thing is the vulnerability is a lot more in depth. I can really give more to my personal relationships in the form of like access to intense parts of real deeper, vulnerable parts of myself. It's not that I wouldn't give that to a client. I'm for disclosure. I disclose like, parts of myself to my clients, but the way that it's, I won't say packaged, but like the way that it's sort of given is different. I mean, it's like, I will give that to my clients in maybe a more kind of sort of manageable, like most of the time I'm telling them how things were in past tense, right? That's the kind of bigger part of it. Challenging things that I've experienced, not necessarily something I've overcome, but like just something that like I was in the throes of, and like in a certain period of time. And with my partner, with people in my life, like they can I mean, I'm with them, and it's important for me to also like be open with them of like really in-depth moments of vulnerability where I'm like, I don't know what to do with this right now, and I don't know how to like make sense of this, and I don't know how to, I'm like feeling a very intense sense of loss or chaos. I think chaos is another, like they really get to see more chaos in a way that I think is important for the relationship. And also just like, real, like, it's not, um, it just shows up, as part of life as well. But with clients, like it's sort of like, I want them to know, but not necessarily experience, those parts of me in the moment, because that can be overwhelming and it's not helpful sometimes. And it's not, I mean, this, I mean, it's what they pay me so that we don't have to delve into those parts, as in depth. And, the part of that arrangement is that we can I can tend to that outside, and then we can really focus more on the parts that relate to them. And at times my parts that relate to the parts that relate to them. Right. So, that's sort of a difference, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a lack of better words that are coming up from my mind right now. Just a slept off part of therapy that a lot of clients don't consider, of just how strategic we are as therapists, of like what we're giving to the client. I think as more and more people, especially more marginalized communities and cultures of color, come and seek out the work, there's this question of, God, I know nothing about this person and they're not willing to give it to me. What is this? Like, they're saying they're here for relationship, but this doesn't feel like relationship. And you're hitting on something really important here of like, yes, and, this space is so dedicated to you. And I'm going to strategically choose when I impose myself and my past experience onto like your life.
Yeah. I mean, a big thing is like, I think you're kind of approaching like is differences in privilege, differences in identity, with regards to certain, even specific conversations and specific topics. Like, I'm from the Middle East, I'm Egyptian Palestinian. Not a lot of my clients actually know depth into that. And I've seen and will see like veterans, that have been part of the military, and and they'll want to talk about their experiences. I also see people that like will come in after something of news that, things that have been happening in Gaza, and like, and they'll want to talk about it. And, at times it becomes something I can share more about. And at times I can very much tell, like, this would become overwhelming to our space and our relationship, and will cause them to stumble as they try to get into the deepening part that I'm talking about, where they feel like, then they'll be really sort of attuned, to what they are saying and why and all of that. And I really don't want that. And that goes also with like all forms of relationships for me. I mean, it's just not just about being a therapist. Like, I want people to be able to express, themselves and talk, and we can figure out like, how that affects me, and how, we can both figure out this, the like the implications of how we feel, and what we think. We can figure that out. And it's a trusting thing. I don't want people to worry too much of that too soon, too early, that they close themselves off. And that goes with, I mean, charged political conversations, but also goes with a lot of other things, it goes with like conversations about sexuality, or conversations about like many other topics. It's like people have, from their life experiences, lots of, parts within them that like get triggered, that tell them to sort of reflexively, right, like restrict, and to hold back, and to tighten, and And that's my concern, is like, I want to make sure that people feel able to delve in and stumble and kind of trip around. And I know from social, just from, like social expectations and stuff, that like they might feel less inclined to do that if there's a lot of disclosure on my part. So yeah, maybe that's kind of a little bit, and that's to the question about like differences in relationship. That's not something that I, have to guard as much with more intimate relationships. Although it still is a concern, it still shows up. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and it makes me curious of how that impacts you, just like personally, to sit across with someone who, maybe you have a very separate worldview from them,
Yeah.
which is often the case for us therapists.
Yeah.
Or worldview in whatever aspect of worldview,
Yeah.
we want to give example to. But how does that impact you as your own person to sit across from someone who has a very different worldview than your own, or is speaking about their personal experience in almost like a negative way or a non-honoring way of your own personal experience? Like, how do you hold that space as well?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that will show up. It will absolutely, for any therapists of color, or really more students, that of therapy, that are trying to become therapists, that are BIPOC or part of the minority. Just like really important to be aware of, because it became very evident for me early on that as much as I've had many, many mentors and supervisors that and educators that have taught the world to me in a wealth of knowledge and experiential knowledge, that I'm still just taking in and more. They have so much to offer me. The absence of more representation from like my community, it's been more, it became noticeable as I noticed like, oh, there are particular experiences where I sit in the room and there's a difference in our positionality, like the other person has a certain level of power or privilege that I don't have, that is kind of different than what you're trained for. Like I noticed pretty quickly that even in my program that was very, very, I guess, like conscientious about cultural differences and all these things, a lot of therapy programs, a lot of like psychology programs, like they kind of make the assumption, it's not maybe explicit, but it's sort of baked in to how they teach you, that you are in the position of power, that you are the person that like is more ordered, or like sort of like you have your shit together, or like you have your right wiser other. You're the wiser other. You're sort of more. Sometimes it's even like that you're older. That's kind of sometimes I've felt implied a little bit, that you're more advanced in some. Like that's kind of and I think it's historical. Like therapists started in the past, and as like older men, and older white men and stuff. So usually with like doctorates and stuff. So it's like it implied a certain thing, but it didn't. It wasn't a lot of exploration of what it means to be on the other end of like certain things. And one of them is like the example, more specifically, of working with people who've been in the military, who I will say it's not that there's an ideological difference or like a ethical difference as much. Like it's not as though there isn't like blatant, I'll just say this, like there isn't like blatant racism that is experienced. I think that dynamic would be different, but it's still something that's in the room, to put it bluntly, like the reality that if they saw active duty, that this person that I'm working with likely interacted with people that look like me and spoke as I speak. And that might have even been some of the only interactions that they've had with somebody that looks like me and speaks the language I speak, before meeting me. And it was one of like complete and total dominance, existential, dominance of life and death, where they maybe held a gun, pointed or not at them, where they maybe ordered them to do certain things, and they held the power to end their lives or to relocate them or to imprison them. And that's a reality that, is just part of our world. And part of the dynamic of how Arab Americans and people from the Middle East and, and other parts of the world too, experience, right, with, people who've served in the military or otherwise in the U.S. So because of the recent, wars and so I sit in the room with folks that, them and I get along really well socially. And if we were sort of out in a, public space and we're friends, like we're like getting to know each other in like a restaurant or something, like we probably have a nice chat and everything be fine. But there's a depth that would be missing, which is the reality that there's this element, and we can have conversations and just avoid the element altogether. But I think it escapes the opportunity to touch on that element, right? Sure. And I think as my clients who have been in the military, or were, or are, have been able to get into the deeper work, they have pointed to that, like, yeah, that's a big part of like, choosing me or working with me, or what they do want to touch on, even if they don't know how, or fascinating, or it's scary or whatever. But it's it's a very, it's a very interesting dynamic. And there are other dynamics that are sort of, that will happen, right? Like gendered and other, working with women, working with trans women, where like I can tell there's, experiences, right, that's kind of flipped, where like there's something about my maleness and my masculinity that like is triggered, and we kind of navigate that. But that work is wonderful because, again, that's a space that they might not be able to explore with if they're chatting with somebody, at a gathering or a party or Thanksgiving dinner or something. But like we can be intentional. We can notice it. We don't need to like resolve it or do something in particular, like do a certain activity to cleanse it or something. Mm-hmm. Something might come up that we do, but even just being able to like be in the room and acknowledge it and be like, oh, that's, you feel that, I feel that, it's been present between us, and it might be present out there when you encounter other people. It's really powerful.
Totally. It sounds like in your practice, that's something you try your best not to shy away from those types of conversations.
Oh yeah.
Right. Even if it's impacting you personally, being able to, do you call it like compartmentalizing that feeling, or do you stay with that in the moment, especially if it's a feeling of like, oh, the client, what they just said hurt my feelings, or like, neglected a part of my identity just then when they said that. What do you do with that feeling if that exists for you?
This is probably related to other questions that we talked about too, but because I'm trying to be present, and because, I can't really like escape it. I can't dissociate and really start to tend to myself too much. I want something more like, accessible and immediate, but also like tangible and powerful. And so I'll use imagery. One image, this is funny and weird, and I'm going to say it. One image is the clip from The Green Mile. Have you seen that movie with Tom Hanks? And which apparently was written by Stephen King. I didn't know that. Kelly actually, I think, told me that. Oh, I think it was Kelly. Yeah.
I'll have to ask her.
Yeah. But The Green Mile, there is the scene where the prisoner, right, the black man in the movie that is like, discriminated against, and just goes through all I haven't seen the movie in a long time, but there's a particular scene where, I mean, as I recall, he has like a gift, right? He has like this, like he has a power. And I think it's a lot more like about physical, as I'm recalling, like ailments, right? Like disease or, disability or something that's physical. But he has the ability in the movie where there's the scene where he kind of like sucks in like what looked like bugs or something. Like it was this kind of like magical mana like energy thing that like he was just kind of taking in. I was like, it was almost like black smoke and like little like
I need to watch this again.
you gotta watch it. Yeah, it's a good movie. I gotta watch it too. I haven't seen it in
So long. Yeah.
yeah, but he kind of takes something in, and in a way it kind of it right, this disappears, and the other person, the ailment, they have some kind of disease or something, like goes away. Or I think sometimes it's even like a even mental or spiritual thing that he's taking to make them feel better. And he takes this in, and he kind of like lets it out. And I think it also it kind of is shown in the movie that it but some of it will like kind of still be there, and it'll affect him, and he just kind of, it wears on him. Well, that's what I think. That scene, it kind of plays in my head, and I think about experiences with clients where I am kind of in the room, and I am kind of like really trying to be there in the presence, and I am ingesting and taking into my nervous system, into the fibers of my body, just a lot of the stuff that's just been like coagulating and stuck and like clogging, and just and again, like very physical ways, but also in like a symbolic way too, like their tissues, their nervous system, their their inner world, their psyche, and just something gets kind of transferred in a way, now that it's a ritualistic process, and but like something happens there, and then I have spaces where I'll just kind of do that, could literally be that, or it could be like moving my body, or different things that I do outside the work.
Yeah, I'm getting that there's power in even you just being aware that this is part of the process.
Yeah.
Like on any given day, it could be that a client or a peer or anyone in your life, I guess, where we just extend it, will impact you negatively, or will say something that will like get your attention in a way that doesn't feel so good. And like your ability to just name that process exists allows you to take it in a full way, and still facilitate therapy for this client to figure it out, because that's what they're doing at the end of the day, just figuring it out. And if you're choosing to impose this negative feeling in the conversation, like we said earlier, you're doing so in like a strategic while also compassionate way. It feels right.
Yeah, because sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's like a maybe somewhat playful kind of like jabbing, or like it was a silliness, or like there's so many like different types of like things that will show up in the moment that need to, I think, in relationship for clients, and I want them to let go a little bit of the restriction, the holding back, and part of that is trusting that like what comes up, we can feel into and manage, and it won't define our space. I mean, coming back to, I think we were like talking about that earlier, like I think a big thing is that like they're able to sort of share something and feel trusting of, I'm going to give you this, and you won't leave, and you won't sort of like, tell me like, fuck you, or like, how dare you, or I don't know if I was cuss here.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But like they do want like a feeling of that. And not that we can always guarantee that. There are things that we're human, so there are limits to, what a therapist can take, as well as there are to any person. Like I'm not here to be abused, but
of course
I am here to like try to give you more than I think can be accessed in other spaces, because we're trying to really be intentional about entering into that and pushing it to its limits, maybe.
I think in the subtext, what we've been talking about here, there's the work, and also like how you care for yourself, getting into the self-care of, moving your body and accepting the process of the job and all of that, as well as like watching your shows. What let me form the question here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just curious about, as I'm thinking about the question, of like this term of self-care. And it looks very different for everybody. And again, another term, just like presence earlier, that a lot of people throw around, but maybe don't know what that means. How would you describe that for someone?
Yeah. Self-care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I once, this reminds me of like, I once had a prompt and, I think for a workplace, and they asked us to, like, what does that mean? And I just kind of like, I took the words and kept going with them until they made like nonsense. And, I just kind of said stuff like, it's care for yourself when you're caring self. I just kept like doing that and repetitively until it just kind of, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, um, um, I think of like intention more as a, and maybe that's just like semantics, but like, yeah, I think of intention more as the word that like feels right to me, at least, which is like uh just trying to be intentional about I mean, yeah, like tending to, caring to parts of me that, if I just stick to the paths, that are kind of set for me out in the world, I think I would forget about myself a lot. I think I would forget about these parts a lot. And that comes back to like why people come to therapy, why I think they should, is because there isn't that much in our world out there, that encourages us, supports us, facilitates or creates a space to tend to these things. And I think without tending to them, they do atrophy. They do sort of like really they struggle. So trying to, a really powerful form of self-care is observation and attunement, like just attuning to, inwardly, like introspective, like, observation and attunement, like, observe kind of what's happening within me, mind and body and all of that. And then try to stay connected to it, stay present with it. As I then, and then if I'm kind of feeling playful, as I kind of, you know, play around, I kind of try different things, right? And again, that can feel like a stretch in a metaphorical way or a literal way. Like I'm kind of feeling like parts of my body, feeling the tightness or the looseness or the, and then just kind of moving my body around as I kind of feel into it a little bit more. And I can do that with right parts of me within me. Like if I'm feeling a sense of like, just a sense of melancholy, like a sense of just like, or a sense of despair or something, I can really try to, look inwardly in some way and just try to observe like what's happening here, like, and it's a conversation with self that you develop, that, I hope you know yourself a little bit. Like I hope you all know ourselves a little bit to kind of have our own, kind of like the talk with your partner, your own talk with yourself of like, hey, what's happening here? Like, what's happening here that we're here again? Like, what's sort of what's come up? Is it the same as always? Because maybe it is, and I have space for that, or is this something different this time? Is something else that I need to sort of be aware of? Is there something that I've missed? And like really just being tenderly curious with myself. I mean, to touch on, I think the intention of that phrase self-care is because the world out there expects of us to tend and care to so many different things because of the structures that are built by our work and our school and all of that, and our parents and our family. It's constantly tending to all these things that we forget to sort of like direct that tender curiosity inward and try to really, parse out some space and time for that in our day and our schedule and our or whatever. So it's like, yeah, like I think you should try to connect to that part and maintain it as a sacred kind of duty to yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Stole the words right out of my thought process. I think anytime self-care comes up, it's as a result of something in our external world pulling us away from self. And what I hear you saying is granting yourself this loving attention that you would give in all these other areas. And when you do that and bring this tender observation to yourself, that is often what brings you back to who you are and like brings you back to this curiosity for like what's going on in your body and what you're taking on. I totally get that. And like, speaking of coming back to yourself and who you are there any go-to things in your personal life outside of this space that allow you to do that? That like you can say, I do this and it really feels like Mohamed, like it makes me feel myself.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a few things. People know that about me now. I've been saying, I like to take baths in the morning. I take a lot of baths, and it's very much related to water in that way. If we're getting really woo-woo with it, it's almost like I'm birthing myself every morning. I'm kind of like, it's a little weird to put it in that way, but like, it's a really hot and warm bath, and I put salt, so it's a particular experience, and I kind of like, and it especially is important to me, in the cold in the winter of, as somebody who's come from, mostly desert climates, urban, but like, the climates are hot, really hot climates. And in a space, I like, this is kind of a thing of like, I know you, like, to know yourself, it also kind of to know, the parts of you that are connected to places, and connected to experiences that you have a tether with, and that is still rich and strong and rooted, in some way, in your own way. That's really important, right? Like my relationship with my culture and with my background and with like my history, all that is one that I've had a lot of agency in, and I can sort of like experiment and experience with in my own way. But the bath thing, it's kind of like I kind of sink into, it's my way of like, I'm trying to be present with the fact that I live in a cold climate and, it's winter in Seattle, but I also recognize that a part of me, even down to my bones, really gets nourished by like heat, like really like solid heat that gets into my bones, like into the core of my body. And so I get into a hot bath early in the day, and that heat, I think, carries me through a lot of times throughout the day, and wastes a good bit of water. I'm sorry for the environmental effect of that, but like it's really important to me. And
I will say I love that I know that about you, and like I get the explanation, because before we started the podcast, as Mohamed entered the space here, he was like, can you turn up the heater a little bit, because I can have the heat off in this room. And I was like, it's just a chilly guy, this guy, Mohamed. But your explanation makes it a lot more like, oh, as you're talking, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And it probably could be warmer here.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for telling me that. But I know that about you. Is there anything else other than the bath?
There is.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just, the reason again is like, I mean, I'll be fine if the room's cold. Like I'll adapt and I'll manage. But I know that it I think I told you this. I know that my body will start to sort of like respond and try to accommodate to that discomfort, or to that in a way that actually takes me from my presence. So I think I told you in the beginning, like, I will start to sort of like notice that I'm stiffening up because it's a little cold in the room. It's mild, but like I'll kind of tighten, and maybe as a response from that, my body will start to sort of like kind of shake a little bit to try to, because that's what, when we shiver when it's cold, like, it's trying to warm your body up, the movement. But then my body just feels like I get sort of like, out of it a little bit from that. And I feel almost like anxious because I'm kind of shaky. And so it just kind of confuses things. Something I know about my body. So I just kind of try to, if I can help by changing the environment. I think that's a big thing with therapy, like teaches you to like, try to work on yourself, but also sometimes if you can change your environment, like,
and advocate for yourself.
Advocate for yourself. Yeah. It's like
yourself so well. Yeah.
Yeah. But to the other part, I'll give you one other thing. And I like to nerd out about particular things. Like I like to go into a deep dive about a specific like topic. Usually it's history or something. And it's kind of like a treat to myself. Like if I find a time in the week that I can do that I could just have it's almost like a thing that is also a sign that I've given myself empty time, because or however you want to call it, just like free time, open time, right? Like a scheduled slot of nothing, right? Like, we don't do that as much. But if I did that, right, sometimes I'll just, kind of lazy around, which is what my body and mind needs. But sometimes what comes up is this really like deep curiosity about a specific thing, and I just kind of dive into it, and I get very happy about like getting to know very bizarre, facts about some period in history in some place. And I'm just like, ooh, that was like an hour of like deep online searching and reading about some specific thing, and I feel great. Yeah, like that kind of brings me back to a form of curiosity that I have within me, that I think also helps me balance with the curiosity that I have with my clients, that's maybe more gentle and more relational, and I get to kind of release that that inner itch and urge for a more I don't want to say exploitive, but like I'm more kind of like, I want to know, like give me that, like there's no restrictions and limits when I search about something online, because I could just keep going and asking questions. Whereas with a client, I have to tend to like, oh, that's too much. I gotta pull back.
Yeah.
So it's a gentle, tender kind of curiosity. And that's more of a curiosity that's for me. It's more, it's my way of treating myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I feel like when I think about that question for myself, and as I've been reflecting somewhere in the background, as I've been listening to you about how do I employ a level of presentness and self-care in my own life, relationship, interestingly enough, is what I lean into. Like I love hosting dinner parties.
Yeah.
I love having people in my home like this, It's partially the reason I set up the podcast. And like, because I feel like so disarmed in myself in like this space and with people. I like want to put myself in those positions, and like I do that at work, and it's my self-care outside of it in a way that it just feels so me, which is really nice to know. Coming back to like knowing yourself, like that is actually what's grounding. And I could tell myself when I just need a veg day, I'm like, I don't want to see anybody, and I just want to lay by myself and eat. As controversial maybe as it is for other people listening, like sometimes I just want to scroll on my phone mindlessly and not think, where it's like, that's okay too. And it's just this reconnection, true asking the body and the self, like what it needs in that moment.
Yeah.
And like, if you're doing that, then what you're choosing is informed and sounds like it's the right thing to do for your body.
Yeah. Passive, listening, with the scrolling or whatever, like passive kind of, okay, I get that. Do you, I'm curious about the part with podcasting. Like, do you see a connection between like why you picked this up related to the part of you that picked up became a therapist, like interconnected in some way?
Yeah, I think there are many reasons as to like why I wanted to structure this podcast up the way it's structured. But one of those reasons is because I find myself having so many interesting conversations. Like you and I have had interesting conversations at work, whenever we can. And I sit there and I'm just astounded what people say and how people feel and what people's perspective on the world is. I'm like, damn, I wish I had a mic right now. So then more people would have access to this, so there's that. And like, I truly feel connected in conversations like this. So in like a selfish way, I know that's very fulfilling for me. So to do a podcast where I can meet both of those needs, where I'm like, the community gets to know you and gets to understand how cool you are. I too get to deepen my connection. And feel like, and also like build my professional network and like know who I can refer to you and all that stuff. But like more so just deepen my connection to you, because that feels like, I don't know, this might be a heavy claim, but like the purpose of life, at least purpose of my life, to get to know and touch point with like so many people on a level that's deeper than the surface. So I don't know if that answers the question of like podcasting and its connection to how I got into therapy, but I feel like to answer that second part, getting into therapy was the same reason, similar to yours, of like wanting to understand how people, and how people work, and what an opportunity to do that and also get paid for it, than the therapy provides. So I appreciate you asking that question.
Glad that you answered. I mean, glad that you clearly like felt through and thought through like that part within you that wants to do this. Do you feel a particular like kind of desire with the sharing part? Like, because you're touching on like there's something that happens between you and I, and there's a desire to share that. What is that? Why do we want to like? There's a part to that happens with probably every type of field or whatever, right? Like the desire to publish, or the desire to sort of like broadcast, or kind of expand and share and I guess like reach out. Like, what does that look like within you?
Good question. I think similarly, growing up, there was a sense of belongingness that I questioned within myself, of like, how do I belong in certain situations? And there were often times where I felt very disconnected to the environment around. Sure, like I've been privileged to be blessed with like so many great people in my life who have been with me. Like I have the same friends that I went to pre-K with still today. And like, I loved that. And there are still areas of my life where I wondered if I belonged, or I wondered if I was part of this community, or what this community is. So like, I think this need, or this part of me that feels inclined to share conversations like this is it younger or older? I guess it's not perfect, but like a younger part of me that like just wants to feel like included. I'm doing this thing with my hands, like a hug, or like circle where it's like everybody's belonging, right? Belonging.
Everybody's in.
Yes.
That's a big one.
And it's like, I'm feeling so connected in conversations like this. And I just want more and more people to feel connected. And I think that somewhere in the subtext, and someone making a decision about going to therapy or staying in therapy with their therapist is there. Like, they want to know that you are someone who can take care of them. You are someone they can relate to. I am someone who will be present with them. And I think conversations like this allow someone that knowledge, or like that confidence in us.
That experience is so, and as you're talking, I'm just kind of like, wow, it's so like, so human, and so like, I don't know, best word to put, like primal almost. And it's such a powerful force within us, and it's at core to like, when it gets, I guess, wielded in like the challenging and horrific ways, right? When people, have a particular experience of like nationalism, or religion, or ideology, or whatever, and they're like, oh, I need everybody to be on board. I need everybody to belong to this. I will go and like, and use violence to try to bring people in, right? And then the kind of the other end of that, right? The experience of like, there's something here really powerful that I think therapists experience with themselves, with each other, with their clients, like, that they're like, I want other people to kind of be brought into this in some way. There's a very human thing, I guess is what I'm saying, like in the just desire to like, I want more people to experience this connection, this joy, this and yeah, and it's a balancing thing too. It's just kind of like how much of that you do and how much of that you're just like, I'm just gonna be in it and just like, and like people will kind of, people will come but yeah, it's a very human thing. I love that.
I mean, I like what you just said there. Like, people will come or people won't. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not unaware that, this conversation might not sit well with some people who are listening.
Yeah.
Or some people might not listen because they're seeing, two brown men talk about whatever. And that's fine. There's no forcing nobody to listen to this whole thing or even to show up. But it's also there as an opportunity for people to show up and like to relate and do that. So it's like, I can expand this reach and it still allows people to be like, no, I'll go in for the hug, or like, I'll stay around, and like, that's okay with me.
Yeah. Lean in.
Right. So,
can I just say too, as a this could be great as like a maybe an ad for you as a therapist. You can put it in your bio. Having maintained camera 2, having maintained relationships.
This one's
okay. Having maintained relationships with friends from pre-K that's like a powerful qualifier. That should sell you on like, I want that therapist. Like, like you managed to maintain relationships with people that long, and like, that's a powerful thing. That's a relationship expert. It's a I think that's a special thing. That's really beautiful.
Oh, thanks for saying that. My goodness. Oh gosh, there's so much I wanna talk to you about.
Yeah.
Like, this conversation can go on forever. One last topic before we get into our doorknob question.
Okay.
Because I really want to highlight. I know, we're all out. He's all cold. But we're just,
we're deep into this.
If people are out there who's a consistent watcher of this podcast, thank you so much. But there's an update to my table here, and it's this candle. And Mohamed brought in this candle, and it's very kind. It was like, this was from my wedding, and I wanted you to have this. I guess I just want to know, like, what drew you to do that? Like, what drew you to share this with me and want to light it here as we do this together?
Yeah, I mean, water and fire, I guess, to really touch on those elements. Like, I think it's sad that, along with other things that we've kind of sort of lost direct connection with, we've lost connection with fire and its powerful warming, immediate warming sort of like effect. Fire in a confined, like, safe way, and also like as a lighting source, as a source to, a very relational, you interact with it, and it's not very manufactured in the sense of like, you flick on a switch and it's the same light. There's no movement, there's no like a quality of motion and relationship there as with light, as with fire. I experience like, it's flickering. It can notice the breeze even just when I speak, next to it or something. Like, there's a little, like, it's a beautiful thing to witness, and to also have it sort of be a source of light, and like it's sort of tuned down a little bit more than right overhead intense light, and so it helps too with the stimulation and the I think it's just beautiful. I mean, it's just beautiful to look at fire and to experience the warmth. It's really powerful. Even like candle, if you put your hand over for a little bit, you're like, wow, that is like really hot. It's really, for something that small, it's really powerful.
What is it? What in the world?
Be careful when you do that. Like, it's like, it really surprises you how much power and heat is in something that small. So
I know. I was literally like, when you said that, for full transparency, I was like, well, yeah, Mohamed, it's a candle, right? When I did that, it's like, when I did that,
a little surprise.
It is actually a little surprise.
It's quite hot. Yeah, put it up there for like a couple of seconds.
Yeah, it's free. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the gesture, and like, I'm such a meaning making type of therapist, which I know you are too, where it's like, oh, and meeting a person. And I just think the story behind this, as you share with me, it gets close to my heart because, you know, you said that this was like part of your wedding. You recently got married, and I know that was obviously such a big thing. But through our conversations in anticipation for that, such a huge thing in your life, and like to share even a little totem of that with me means so much, and probably more than you know. So thank you. That's why I want to spend time there, because this feels very special.
Yeah, I went deep into the fire, but yeah, it's also part of our wedding, and yeah, I'm happy that you have it. I hope you use it for the space, and because I'm too much of a therapist at this point. Don't burn yourself, like don't like be very safe with this. I don't want anybody to like hurt themselves, like trying that. Yeah. Anyway, that's all. I'm too much of a therapist.
Just relentless care.
Yeah, if you have, I got concerned, and
there's a loving attention Mohamed carries, and such a care. We'll keep everything safe and everything. So that's awesome. Yeah. Well, every episode we end with a segment that when I had Kayla on, we came to the name of one-off questions, and I have 3 for you that I ask every single guest that's on.
Yeah.
The first one is, what's a small joy in your life that you've been loving recently?
Joy. I don't know. Recently.
And you can't say bad. You can't say little hot.
Yeah, I know. It's like I don't want to use the ones I've used, and there's a few more. I like, it's an experience and a moment in my week, but you know, when I'm able to sort of feel the stillness in my home. I don't have a lot of the internal churning of like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I gotta clean this, I gotta, you know, I feel a sense of like everything's good enough. Everything is fine. Everything is at an okay place. And I can kind of do something I really want to do. Most of the time, the joy I get out of sitting by some candles in a reading nook that I have, and just pick up a book and maintain presence and focus with it. It's also kind of a challenging thing because, you know, I live in today's world, and attention is challenging for all of us now, but you know, it's something that I can do, you know, in these moments of real joy with like a sense of ease and peace and tranquility in my environment and in my relationships and stuff. You know, things are kind of at a good enough place that I can just pick up a book and slow down and read and light a candle. Yeah, it's a big joy.
Yeah, and like, I didn't know that about you, and I feel unsurprised as to like the whole conversation we're having. It makes sense that that's a joy.
Yeah.
Recently. Okay, doorknob question number 2 is, what is one thing, probably out of the many, that your clients have taught you about life or the work itself?
Oh, there's a big one. There's always more. I think
there's always more.
Yeah, that statement. There's always more. I think a really, really powerful, like, I mean, just explosive, like internal epiphany with being a therapist as like when I started, like as a new therapist, as a young therapist, is that, you know, I had this question, especially working with different populations of people, different, you know, backgrounds and stuff, of sometimes working with somebody and I'm like, I'm asking them questions and it's not really, you know, they're giving me one word answers or something, like, I'm not sure what's happening here, you know, like, and I'm just, I feel the, like, you know, kind of pulling back, you know, that I'm getting from the other person. I feel the, like, and sometimes, you know, if you're new to the work, you're kind of like, oh, maybe there's just, you know, maybe there's just not much more here, you know, there's not much happening. There's not, and, you know, I don't want to dismiss that, like, yeah, like, but it's kind of like, you know, waking up, like the sunrise happens every day. And if you ever catch it, like, it's insane, you know, you're like, this just happens all the time. especially if you could go to like Magnuson or something and like catch it with like huge flock of crows, and it's this wondrous, like it feels an explosive experience that's just mundane and daily. And so, yeah, when I sit with somebody and we meet every week, sometimes it could feel like, and I think a lot of times internally they really believe, they're not lying, right? Like they're just like, it's just another week, not much. But something starts to happen when, there's something in the relationship and there's enough time, and that things loosen up, and then powerful, the box is open, Pandora's box, and just things start to sort of spill out in this wondrous, almost sunrise way, or sunset way or whatever, it's just it's just a stream, a waterfall of depth that each of us have. That I think is what I was taught by therapy, and what I'll never forget, and what I experience, just with all my clients, is I know there's more. I trust it so deeply, even when the other person, even when the client or other people say there isn't, or diminish, minimize, their life experiences and stuff. There's so much more. There always is. I hope every therapist really goes into their work feeling that. And I think if you don't, work on replenishing the parts, work on, the relational parts that we need so we could go back to doing it. I think it's essential that we really believe that in the fibers of our like body, that like with every person that we meet, that like, there's more here. Is maybe we can't get to it, you and I, and maybe it can't be in this moment. And sometimes you have to, here and there kind of accept that. But there is more. I know that. Yeah, I know that. And there is a lot more, because I've been proven by that many, many, many times. Times that I thought there wasn't, and times that I thought there was, and everything in between. There's like, whoa, all of that, so.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I have no reflection or anything there. I think you said it very well. That's like, if I know that there is more to this conversation. And
yeah,
all the time.
If we had all the time in the world, and I keep grabbing and there's nothing in it,
it's such a I've been trying to, I've had the thought, and I'm like, I've had to hold myself back. But yeah, I know there's more here, so yeah, we're gonna have to have another episode together.
I hope so. I hope you will invite me again. I would love to do it. I would love to be here again, and I'd love to keep talking. And
I think people would love to hear more about you and from you again. So yeah, we'll have to get something in the books. But what's left is, what more is this last question,
and
of if you could share a message with your younger self, what would that message be?
it'll come. I don't know. Yeah, like just it'll come. I think when you're young, there's a lot that you're anxious about, and a lot of uncertainty, and just a reassuring voice, that I didn't get as much of, or that I get the privilege of providing for some people, sometimes younger people that were my age when it was really challenging, right? Like that expresses that, that things will come, and many things will come to you, and beyond your imagination, and things that you want, things that you don't, things that you didn't know you wanted, it'll all come, and it'll be wonderful, and it'll be painful and all those things, but like, I think just reassurance that life, kind of there's more, right? Like there is more. I think especially when younger folks are not really sure of what life can give, and what it is, and what it'll do, and the horizons, sort of, just to name that, just tell them that, in a comforting way, a calming and supportive way, and like, many things will come. So
Yeah. Wow. Well, I hope your younger self to really hear that, and I hope we all take the opportunity, to share that message with our younger self, because I think that's something that the uncertainty of life is something that our younger selves can't often handle, and just to hear that reassurance from us now, that it'll come, just seems so powerful. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for coming on the show and sharing yourself and jumping in so openly. I really
Do
appreciate
you
it.
have a way of, I mean, I'd like to give you a hug, if that's okay.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We've hugged before, so but yeah.
Oh man, thanks for being here.
Yeah.